Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey, this is the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hello, friend. Hope you're having an amazing day. You look amazing. See what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts. You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So hit that subscribe button. You are going to really enjoy this episode today. It was our pre-show was so great. We just kind of jumped right into it. It's with J.S. Nelson. She is an author of a phenomenal book on business ethics. She is a professor she's a professor at Harvard, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. So here you go.
The book is specifically designed to be in a question and answer format. So you can go to the issue that's coming up and you can give somebody a little bit of background about it. And if they're interested, they can read the questions around it, or they can jump someplace else, right? It's supposed to be one of these things where there are a lot of entry points. You don't have to read it from cover to cover.
Right.
But that's also a tool for compliance officers, because ethics experts and other people who are doing this work inside organizations or for organizations, I know you're a consultant outside, but really so that you can give people a little bit of background of why we're doing this and how it works. And so it's not all having to come from you, which is very helpful, right?
That is helpful,
so then,
yeah.
And also, having it in print and having it be like, look, this is the conversation. These are best practices. These are the benchmarks. This is how this works, right? So that when you come in and you're giving your client advice, or you're in-house and you're thinking about this is, you can show that you're building on this foundation, and that this is a common conversation that people are having, and that you are, inviting somebody to take a seat at the table, that exists already there.
Right.
So I like the book for that purpose, for your audience specifically. And it's at a great price point. It's $18.99 priced so that, in the before COVID, you would go through airport bookstores and get one. And I don't even know what the equivalent is anymore, I suppose.
It's a one-click. It's an Amazon one-click.
It's one-click. There you go. And the version of it that hopefully at your independent bookstores. But it's supposed to be something that's accessible, something that, it's a tool to talk to people. It's a tool to get everybody on the same page. It's a tool to spread what best practices really are, and have people be a little more thoughtful. And I know that, part of what you had asked me in the list of questions was, look, compliance departments are really under pressure. How do you get resources for compliance? How do you get people on board? We feel like we're fighting the good fight, and we're doing it with one arm tied behind our back, and, everybody else being cynical about it, right? And really, this is a tool to empower the people who are already doing the best work inside organizations to be thinking about these issues, to help them bring other people on board, to help organizations understand how fundamental ethics and compliance, and compliance is kind of the floor, but we want pro-ethical behavior, we want pro-social behavior, how fundamental that is to management and the running of an organization. And you cannot sail a ship that is, being eaten apart from the inside by termites. You have no idea what the next disaster is going to be, and which plank needs to be replaced, and what because the termites are always eating away at it. And if you're not actually dealing with ethical issues and dealing with the metastasization of those issues and all the other problems that start happening, right? You're fighting so many issues on so many fronts. You can't possibly manage your organization, nor can you get the best out of people, nor can you get, the innovation and the, employee engagement and the, all the, what you really, really want from people. What you get instead is turnover, and you get constant distraction from all these, disasters. So this is fundamental to even being able to sail the ship.
Thank you for sharing that analogy that I'm going to ethically borrow. I'll ethically borrow that.
Oh,
that
please
is a
do.
phenomenal
And you know
one.
what? I have another one for you, which this is Linda Trevino, who's been doing this work for 4 years.
I just did one. I just did an episode with her. I think
awesome.
it just came out or something. Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
She's
Rockstar.
awesome.
Well, I don't know whether she used this in the episode, but she's written about this. And certainly when I've had her, we do panels and things for academics as well. And she's brought this up. So I'm fully crediting her on this one. But I really like it because she talks about ethics as a garden and how you have to tend the garden.
Yes.
The other part of that analogy, and I know she doesn't say it quite this way, but I will go there and say it. If ethics is a garden, you're going to grow something. right?
Oh,
It's going to
yeah.
always be
Right.
happening. So make sure you grow what you want to grow.
Mhm.
Don't ignore it, right? Because you're going to get bad ethical outcomes. You're going to get you're going to have all your projects and the things that you really care about overwhelmed by other things growing in the garden that are not what you wanted to grow. So ethics is a garden, but that's a double-edged meaning, right?
Yeah,
You
but
can
it's also,
grow
yeah,
the things
it's a
that you want to
double-edged.
grow. You got to tend it though, because if you don't, you will get something else.
It's a phenomenal analogy, actually, or it's phenomenal metaphor. Because something's going to grow in it, and it takes work to keep it growing. It takes work for what you want to grow to continue to grow,
It's
and
going to happen, right? So make sure that you grow what you want to grow.
yeah, right,
Because it's happening already.
And if you're not constantly gardening, something bad is absolutely going to grow. Something that you
Something's
don't
gonna
want
grow
to grow
there.
is going to grow. Right.
Right. Do you want to have choice over what you grow there, or it's going to grow anyway, right?
Right.
So
It's just such an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think that that's the pitch. That our ethics people and our compliance people, look, it's happening. And management loves control. They love to know that they are really running things. And if you're not tending the garden, you're not going to be able to run things. You're not going to be able to manage. You're not going to be able to control. It's gonna overgrow in weeds, and you're going to spend all your time weeding that and not really planting what you want to plant.
Yeah, that's right. You're just reacting. Right.
Yeah.
So
it's going to happen.
So this book, it just came out. Let's just dive in.
Let's
we'll
go.
do the intro later. So the book, you just wrote it, and I the preface of it was like so heart-wrenching. It was such like a sweet story. Share with us that story, because I think it's really interesting, and I don't know, it kind of breathes a different like life into the text that follows, I think.
Yeah, no, this is really important. So I will say, this book was conceived of a long time ago, especially in the news cycle we have now. It was conceived of by Lynn Stout, who you may know from the shareholder value myth. She wrote Cultivating Conscience. She wrote she was one of the first people to really be bridging the work that was being done in business schools and law schools. There's a lot of research, social scientific research, behavioral ethical research that's happening in business schools, but that needs to inform the law. That needs to, a lot of our compliance people are trained as lawyers, or at least deal with the law on a regular basis. And we need to understand the impact that rules have, because it's not always the impact we think they're going to have. Sometimes actually putting in certain rules can create misbehavior. I mean, that's a mind-blowing thought, but like I said, your garden's going to grow something. So think hard about what you're doing and how you're doing it. Right. So we're finding out all these things, that there are these sometimes unintended consequences. My next book is actually on surveillance, workplace surveillance. There's an excellent set of examples of unintended consequences where actually over surveillance can grow misconduct, create it.
Ethical Systems just wrote a pretty interesting article about workplace surveillance.
Yes, I've been talking to them about it, and I'm actually the researcher that's on their research webpage. They have a that's
who knew?
That's me.
I guess I need to
That's
dive
me.
into all the pages. I didn't even know that. Okay,
that's me. Yeah. So no, I've been talking about this for a while, and so that's actually the next book in work. But
Cool.
Let's get back to this book.
Yeah.
I just use that as an example because there's so much there, and with COVID-19, so many of us are experiencing the surveillance at home.
Right.
But getting back to this book and Lynn's vision was, look, we need to create something that's accessible. Too often, when we talk about business ethics, it's siloed. It's siloed because there's a piece of it that economists are teaching as blind spots, or economists are teaching as game theory, and psychologists are teaching as blind spots, and moral philosophers are teaching as very rich, beautiful history and theories, and the lawyers are often teaching as compliance, and these all need to meet, and people need to have the benefit of all these different lenses, and there was nothing else like that out there. And we really also wanted to have one place where somebody who was being given, say, an unethical order at work could go to figure out what to do, and to get the background that lawyers were usually charging depending on where you are, thousands of dollars an hour, but this is the background that people need to understand when they're working for a corporation. What does it mean to work for that type of entity? What does it mean to be to be an employee in these contexts? What can you be asked to do? What can you not be asked to do? And what happens when there's an internal investigation and, you may want to cooperate or decide what's happening? And how do you, but most importantly, how do you design compliance systems? What do we know about best practices? What are the best compliance systems out there? What do they look like? How do we model ourselves on them? How do we design for an ethical culture and ethical behavior? Because we know so much about it now. We really have, thanks to, we mentioned Dr. Trevino, but, Dr. Ken Brunzel, Dr. Max Bazerman, there's so many people that we could name who have been working on this for a very long time, and have been thinking hard about what it means and what we need to have in place. And we know something about this, and so we should be passing it on and make sure that it really is accessible to everyone. Lynn passed in 2018. She had the original vision for the book was that we would each write half of it. She really wanted to talk to me because I was coming from business school, and she'd been my corporations professor 20 years before and kept in touch with me and just was a huge mentor and influence on me, and really kept pulling me to try to, wait, we have to bring this to the public. We have to bring this to where it has a popular impact. People need to have this vocabulary, have this information, be able to talk about it. And that was Lynn's vision, but actually that's the research on ethics.
Yeah, right.
People should own ethics. Everybody should be talking about ethics. Ethics is everybody's subject. The worst thing that our compliance officers and people interested in ethics can do is say, that's my territory. You don't, I own it and nobody else is involved. And then we get massive misconduct, right? Because they're not responsible for ethics. It's often this other department. Everybody's got to be talking about ethics. The language of ethics has to be present in the organization. It has to be something that everybody owns, is theirs, is comfortable with, can bring out in a meeting when something happens. So I thought that was a really important vision, and I signed on. And then unfortunately Lynn got sick and, like I mentioned, passed in 2018. And so she had the first chapter written. It's her chapter. Nobody's touching that one. We're revising it. I'm like, no, you're not. But it's a beautiful chapter, and it really does set out what the vision is. And then she had pieces of the second chapter kind of in works and other pieces. And we had worked on the table of contents together. And the table of contents
Awesome.
is very detailed.
Yeah.
It's got the questions. It's got where we wanted to go. I fleshed out and put another piece on negotiations and some other things in there. But it's really the vision that we brought to bear together. And then after she passed, I wrote the rest of the book because that needed to happen and it needed to be out there. And so part of what I feel when I share this book with people is that this is Lynn's voice too, that this is really important. This is obviously Lynn's last book, published after she's gone. And they need to hear her voice and the passion that went with it and the ideas and the rest of it. And if I've updated it and brought it to life and all the rest of it, then it was an honor to do so. And the book was written with a lot of love, a lot of care. And it was actually Lynn's dying wish that I be listed as first author. So, and it's really nice that what the press said was that would be the ethical thing to do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you can feel the passion in it. There's something about the written word. You could write the same words on a page, I believe, and if there's a bunch of emotion behind those words, or literally the exact same words with no emotion, you can feel it. And what I love about your book is it's super accessible, it's very actionable, and you can feel that love that is in it, and especially in this realm where things can sort of sometimes become very sort of sterilized or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I found it to be very refreshing, and which is what it should be. I mean, we're talking about human behavior, so that's a bunch of human beings
and ethics and us owning it all, and
Right.
why we should care, right?
Right.
Every single one of us should care, and why that should speak to us, and this should be ours. Yeah.
Well, I think people do care, but I feel like our sort of workplaces make them on maybe it's a subconscious level. It makes them feel stupid for having cared, and they feel like I have to callous over that and I can't care because it's all about the dollar bill and it's all about, shareholder value and making profits and so forth. And I think we're at this really interesting, everything swings, right? Everything swings in a pendulum. I used to work for a guy who was a little bit older, and he just gave me that picture once. He's like, everything swings and it swings too far and it'll swing back again. And since he said that, I've seen that over and over and over again. And I think as this pendulum starts to swing back from that sort of Milton Friedman mode that's kind of been, I don't know, it's kind of been like bastardized into this other thing that I think is probably beyond whatever he intended when he wrote that thing, that essay, that famous essay. I think we're swinging back in a good way, and we're at a unique time, right? There's a generational shift. There are different priorities. There's different things that people are trying to solve for in their jobs and where they're spending their time. And I mean, you're seeing it with the Great Resignation. I guess I could just keep kind of rambling on about this, but like more and more people are prioritizing that. They're leaving toxic workplaces. I mean, two out of three or 1 out of 3, depending on which study you look at, are of the workforce are looking for a new job. And, one of the top 3 reasons they're trying to go somewhere else is like more purpose, like a company that doesn't feel like it's lying, where its stated purpose or its stated mission is not in conflict with the actions that they see around them, or that actually overlays with their own purpose, right? I mean, people don't want to work in toxic work environments again, anymore. And anyways, I just love how accessible the book is. I love how, actionable it is, like I said. And I just think the format, to your point, anybody could kind of jump into it in any one of these, I don't know, what it's like 15 chapters or something, any of these different areas, and find a good kind of question that they could use for their own brain, for their own like change that they're driving, as like workshopping with their team, workshopping with other leaders. I'm just kind of brainstorming on how this book can be applied, but I can't say enough good stuff about it.
Oh, thank you. And the science is solid. I mean, that's the other thing is, is this rock solid academic research and rock solid legal issues and rock solid, economic analysis, all the rest of it. Like, this is something that's, part of what you see sometimes on these questions is, people go to the internet and they sort of find things of dubious quality, or somebody's got an angle or something to sell. And it's really hard to vet sources. So another thing that was really important to Lynn was also that we have an appendix of resources at the back, good quality resources you can reach out to, if you're a whistleblower, to think about. There are a lot of people who will take your money. You're in a vulnerable position. Who could you actually start talking to?
Isn't that
right?
sick?
And
though?
How do we do it?
Isn't that sick that you have to even say that people will take advantage of somebody who's in that kind of a vulnerable position as a result of their sort of like overly ethical, that overly ethical catalyst relative to like the average person's response to whatever kind of prompted that whistleblowing? It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, our whistleblowers are overwhelmingly reporting because of ethical concerns. I mean, 92% of them report internally first, even when it's legally to their disadvantage to do so, right? I mean, think about, they are trying to make change. They are trying to say, hey, this does not comport with our values as a company. Does not comport with what we should be doing. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And that's a very important conversation to have in any company at all times. It has to do with this idea of corporate culture and who we are,
right?
What we will do and what we will not do. And, I think that you made a very important point early on about how often in business people hide that part of themselves, either because they want to come off as hard-boiled, cynical or whatever it is. But it's very interesting because all this research on ethics, especially as we look around the world, it's amazing how similar values are.
Right.
Not the manifestation of the values, not the actual behavior, but the values. So things like fairness, equality, reciprocity, generosity, how you treat guests. I mean, these are very basic, very core human values. Now, that is different than a lot of people presume. A lot of people think, what you're going to see uniformly across cultures is something like the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. No, in some countries and some cultures, you must kill. It's an honor killing, right? In other cultures, you can't at all. It's not that. But when you ask people, why did you do whatever you did? It's always some issue of fairness, equality, generosity, reciprocity. These issues of the same core values may drive very different behavior. And so that is really important to know. There's only about 6 of them. And you can do these experiments, and many professors have, with undergrads, where you just have these conversations in a class. I'm sure you did it at the Kelly School, where you'll just boil it down and you'll get, up there, fairness, equality. It's like the same six.
Right.
And what's really important about that finding is that means that that's the basis of a conversation with anyone, anywhere around the world. Right? Because you can say, look, what are the values that are going into this discussion? And that changes the conversation completely. It may turn from a cost benefit analysis to, oh, wait a minute, this doesn't reflect our values. This is not who we are. This is not what we want to be. And if and you can talk about it in terms of norms. We wouldn't feel comfortable. We already know what, this is Mary Gentile's work too, right? With giving voice to values. And I'm really, it's important to me, and that as we have this conversation, we make sure that listeners get good quality materials, good quality resources to reach out to. And another really excellent set of resources, which are free. Mary Gentile's written her book, but the University of Texas Business School at Austin, McCombs, has done Ethics Unwrapped, and you can just Google it. Ethics Unwrapped is the website. It's a bunch of free little cartoons and vignettes, and but it's super easy, super accessible, gives the basis of a formula for how to speak truth to power without getting fired, how to have these conversations about values, how to break through that cynicism of, well, it's just cost benefit analysis, because you can really change a discussion when you go back to values, and as a way of doing it where you talk about what are the common values, what is that mission statement of the company, what is it that we say that we do, and how are we actually doing it. And that cuts right through all that hard-boiled stuff. It really does. It's very powerful in a room, and especially as you start to help people understand what the repercussions are of certain decisions, and then give them options, right? It's not just, no, we shouldn't do that, but how about if we better articulate our values going this direction? This would be, this is how this is a win-win-win-win, and this is something for, that we can stand behind and be proud of, and, commit to. It's incredibly powerful, exactly because of that shared conversation, and because people innately want to be doing these things. I mean, even the most hard-boiled person is usually, deeply conflicted about what they're doing at some level.
Yeah.
I mean, there are psychopaths, right? People who truly do not have consciences. They absolutely exist. They're a percentage of the workforce. They're
it's not 10% of people
represented in boardrooms.
It's not
and
half
in prisons,
of people.
Yeah,
but it's not half of people. To your point,
but that is, and here's another way in which we can describe this. And I like this kind of lay of the land conversation, right? Where we have some idea that there's 7 to 8% of the world, and it's pretty consistent, that cheat. And they'll cheat for small amounts for all kinds of, that's the 7-8% of, of people lie on their MBA applications, right? 7-8% of them, the same 7-8%, tend to, cheat in online gaming systems where we can watch them and they don't know that they're being watched, right? This is always the problem with studying misconduct. You want to be able to watch it without them knowing that you're watching it.
Yeah, right.
So online gaming systems are a great way to do this, because you can watch what they're doing without them being aware of it. So, but the statistics are almost always the same. It's that 7 to 8%. They'll cheat for small amounts and doing math problems. They'll do that, like there's 7 to 8% who will just die hard cheat because it's what they like to do, right? But it's fascinating because it's the same 7-8% each time, and by and large, in a normal environment, people react. Everybody else reacts to that like they would to a disease. They get the heck away from it.
What do you mean in a normal environment?
In a normal environment. So I'll talk about how you change environments later. Okay. But like an online gaming system, if there's some way in which you cheat and somebody's labeled as a cheater, other people will not play with them. They will not engage them. They will not. They will not do deals with them. They will not buy things from them. They will ostracize someone who's listed as a cheater. So what happens is the cheaters tend to cheat with each other constantly, right? Because that's all that's left. They tend to create their own little subgroup, and that's the full extent of their influence, right? in normal systems, when cheating is labeled as cheating, and the cheaters get together, that's the full limit of their influence. That little subgroup, they can only play with each other, they can only do things with each other, and they're the only ones who will do deals with each other, and they don't trust each other, so it's not very efficient. It doesn't work very well, right? Then on the other end of the spectrum, this is far less well studied, but we're sort of speculating here and piecing together pieces of research. I'm guessing it's 2 to 3%. Sometimes some people will say 1.5%. Who knows? It's in that range. 2 to 3%, I would say, is the outside of that, which is people who will always do the right thing. And these are your hardcore Mother Teresa's, like, terrible people to be related to in your family, because they will not react to social pressure. They will always do the right thing. They're very rigid. And that has positives and benefits. It makes it difficult for them in social systems because they're not influenced by so many of the other things that other people are, but it makes them really important people to be able to see what's going on. And they're the ones who are going to call out behavior no matter what, which is great. But that means that between the 7 to 8% on the cheating side of the spectrum, and the say, we have less good figures, but maybe 2 to 3% on the other end of the spectrum, you have 10% of the population spoken for. But I like this message because that means that 90% of the population can go in ways that we design for them, right? We can make it more likely that they will engage in pro-ethical behavior and pro-social behavior and things that are really beneficial for everyone. Or we can disincentivize them from that, which means that the situation can be managed. And this is the huge finding in behavioral ethics, is very often, and I think your audience knows this, but it's really important to reiterate this. People think that that their behavior is fixed. And all of the research from the last 15, 20 years is showing us again and again and again that we can make the same person do very different things in different contexts. With framing, we can get them cold, tired, hungry. We can put them under pressure. We can create unreasonable deadlines. We can do all these things. We've known since the 1950s that if we create quotas, people will cheat. You're just telling people to cheat, right? If that's all you're going to do, and you're going to tell people to put quotas in, they're going to give you the number. If you don't care how they get the number, they're going to give you whatever number, their livelihood depends on.
Yeah, right.
Right? So you can create these systems, but that also means that you can engineer and you can design for ethical culture, right? 90% of your population wants to help you. And we'll throw in the 2 to 3%. So 93% of your population wants to help you, wants to act in ethical ways, wants to engage in pro-social behavior. And the question is, are you going to create a system inside your organization that harnesses that really allows them to engage with ethics, allows them to bring that best part of themselves to work, and lets them enjoy and engage with their job? And we see job satisfaction go way up. You mentioned the Great Resignation. People who feel great about their jobs and the purpose for which they are working so hard, and the team with which they are working so hard, like, they stay. Totally. Right? They stay, and they're willing to work for less money. Surprise, surprise. They are. We see it again and again, and the stats are in the book. Like, this pays. Not only that, it gives you a supercharged corporation. You have more innovation. You have, greater employee engagement and commitment. You're going to get that idea that employee had in the shower, because they're thinking about whatever was going on at work, and they're excited to contribute to that team. You're going to get all kinds of positive economic returns. These companies grow, they grow consistently, they're consistently profitable, they're less risky, investors like them, you can borrow for lower amounts of money. I mean, especially as interest rates are going up, that's a big deal. Right. There are all kinds of reasons that are a fundamental business case, dollars and cents metrics that we can give for getting this right. And it's the basis of being able to manage a company and be able to grow that company and take that company where you want it to go, instead of dealing with, the ship falling apart all the time. You actually have people at the oars excited to say, let's go. Where are we going to go? And how's it work? And there's one more very important point with this. This has a major impact on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion issues, because it is your superstars who are going to leave if it's a poisonous system, but also it's women, minorities, and people who are who experience the world differently, and they're your diversity, right? There's all this research that diverse teams make better decisions, that this is part of running a company that gets better results. And those people tend to experience the downsides of poor ethical cultures even more so than others. So that's a culture that allows for bullying,
Right.
sexual harassment, retaliation, racial, sexual, gender orientation, all the rest of it, slurs. Like, if that is permitted in your company, you're going to lose the people that you have spent the most amount of money trying to recruit to change the face of the company and change your future. And so this is yet again another issue of management, of making sure that you can make good on those investments and on those returns, and really bring those people along for their careers and get the best of them and get the best of everybody else on those teams because of it.
There's a word in Japanese, it's mu, and it's, usually we think of everything in binary terms of yes or no, right? On or off. Well, there's also another one of like neither, or it does not apply or something, right? So that same sort of framework applies to this whole diversity discussion, I think, because on the one hand, you could do nothing for it. On the other hand, you can say, I'm going to have this initiative, but a lot of people, I think, end up falling from like an effectiveness perspective into that mu bucket in the middle, where they say, hey, I'm going to make it even for everybody, or, I have a hiring quota, or I just want to make sure that like this is a diverse company. But like, my point ultimately is like, you're never going to get the benefits of a diverse company unless those minorities, of however you want to like define them,
the very diversity you've been looking for, right?
Unless they feel they can be themselves. Exactly.
How are they supposed to speak up in meetings? How are they supposed to bring themselves to work? How are you supposed to get the benefit of all of this? And the research shows us it's economically beneficial, right? And you're going out of your way to do this. Like, this is part. So again, we come back to this the idea of ethics. It's like the basic foundation of the ship. Right?
Yeah.
You want the ship to sail.
Right.
You've got to deal with these issues. You've got to make sure that you have a culture in which people not only are comfortable, but affirmatively are invited to speak up. So a huge issue with this is making sure there's not retaliation. Retaliation kills all this. And it's actually, it's a huge issue. And there's lots of research on this. And it's interesting because the retaliation rates are amongst the highest when it comes to things like sexual misconduct, even for observers, not even people involved. But there's something about the bullying, abuse of power, sexual misconduct, all these other things which tend to drive people out, this is absolutely linked and clustered with other types of misconduct. We can see it, right? That can, this idea that the rules don't apply, that these basic norms don't apply, means that if I can get away with that kind of behavior, of course, maybe, the accounting misstatements, transferring the funds when I'm not supposed to transfer the funds.
It's like broken window theory and in organizational behavior.
Is very much linked. And I would describe those other issues as also management problems where your company's out of control. If you have bullying inside your company, you're losing, and some of the estimates are 6% of revenues from that.
Wow.
Depending on how high the bullet. I mean, it's going to drive out talent, and it's going to drive it's all these things that are sucking energy, sucking vision, sucking, all the potential out of the company. And if you don't pay attention to these metrics, and you don't manage these metrics, and you don't make these metrics central to being able to operate, you're never going to be able to go anywhere, right? You got to fix the ship first and make sure that you continue to maintain the ship, right? You've got to have a hull that is solid. You've got to, make sure that you're doing the maintenance that you need to do on your ship in order to get any performance out of it. And that maintenance is also going to affect how everybody rows on that ship.
I mean, it's just so bizarre that we even have to talk about this, right? We're talking about these 6, values. Everything you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. We're in a new economy, this knowledge work economy. We're seeing the
people
rot
and
of
their
the
brains
ship.
they're your asset.
100%, 100%,
That's
right?
it. That's your company.
That's your entire company. So why is this, like, why are the light bulbs just not on all the Fortune 500 companies and all the 1,000-person companies? Like, why don't leaders get it? Do you think they think it's fluff? Do you think they're just so jaded from their own trek up the mountain? Do you think they think it's in like conflict with the pursuit of profits that's maybe their real driver for doing it? Like, what do you think is at the core of it, and why is it 2022 and we're talking about this? Like, still talking about it. You understand what I'm saying?
Amen. Well, this is what, Harvard Business School, where I teach this year, has been on the forefront of this and really bringing this to managers and managers' attention, because it's core to being a basic manager. Any kind of general manager needs to have this in their toolkit. They need to understand this. This has to be something that they understand as core to their responsibility to keep the ship afloat, right?
100%. Yeah.
So the question, probing your question, the business schools are onto this. I think the law schools, I was hired to try to develop a business ethics curriculum for law schools. And the lawyers need to see this as their issue too, because they're writing the rules, they're writing the handbooks, they're thinking about compliance in this sense. They need to understand how people react to it. It's core to what they do as well. And so I think it's an educational issue of, these are not things you can ignore, right? These are, and maybe my best guess has been that for so long, there's been so much else that has been going on that had demanded managers' attention. Do we have, where's the stock price today? And, what's in front of my nose? And, I have an activist investor and I'm terrified. And, there's a lot of just stimulus response going on.
It's just short-termism.
And I think it's short-termism because what happens is, if you don't get this stuff right, then you're just dealing with fires breaking out left and right. Like, you're sick. Let's go back to the boat analogy, because we'll stay consistent, right? You're just getting holes, right? And the water's pouring in off of this deck and that deck. And then, look at Boeing right now, right? I mean, first it was,
it's crazy,
airplanes flying out of the sky, falling out of the sky in a 737 Max. And then it was the Dreamliners got problem. Oh, well, yes, we lied to regulators. Oh, yes, now we have production issues. And it's all related, right? I mean, and this was one of the companies that used to actually invest in ethics and did very well for a long time. And you can see that they've been pulling out of that piggy bank for a long time and haven't been reinvesting. And you saw that, there are lots of warning signs for this kinds of stuff. So, for example, moving your headquarters away from where the teams actually are, and then putting managers in charge who are just pressuring for results and didn't want to hear about safety concerns from engineers. I mean, we saw this at GM with the GM nod, right? Is the product going to be ready? Oh yeah, the GM nod goes yes, up and down, and 127 people died from the ignition switch problems, which the engineers knew about and were trying to tell people, but there was no room for this at the company. There was no discussion of it, and it's situation after situation like that. You see, Volkswagen, which had, the emissions control scandals had probably been incubating for at least 17 years, across teams of engineers, hundreds of miles apart, across 10 years of engine redesigns, across all these different models and suppliers. And how does something metastasize to that degree? Well, I would suggest that part of the answer is because Volkswagen was colloquially known in Germany as North Korea without labor camps. Are you going to speak up?
Yeah.
That's a very scary place, right? And your career is tied to this, and this is the job that you have, and the only really good job in the area for somebody with your particular technical skills. And, there are lots of ways in which we can rationalize this, but if you create the culture, you create the misconduct. And that is increasingly what we're discovering. So it's not this idea of, I'll quote Linda Trevino again, because I think she's brilliant on this. It's not just bad apples or bad barrels of apples. It's the management of the orchard. You create all these self-destructive problems. And it's so easy to get it right, but you got to turn it around, and you have to be consistent, and you have to be serious about it. You got to be accountable and transparent and really, follow through at every point. And we have the handbook on how to do this. And once you do that, I would argue this is a competitive advantage. I would say this is a massive competitive advantage. Why would you not do this? This doesn't cost that much. And I also want to point out—
It doesn't cost much.
It doesn't cost much. I think that's a huge takeaway because it can be as subtle. And here is, and Tenbrunzel, another fantastic researcher on this. And she's come out and just said this. It can be, it doesn't have to be a whole disciplinary process. It doesn't have to be drawing and quartering and firing employees and the rest of it. It can be as subtle as, who do we hold up as examples?
Yep.
Who do we talk about in the company newsletter? Who, was it the sales rep who actually gave back the refund because it was the right thing to do? Or is it the person who swindled the money and ran away?
Right.
Or is it, very, very simple things about, this is who we are and this is what we do. And catching things, nipping things in the bud. So around the water cooler, somebody says, that expense report that you put in, we don't do things that way.
Right.
Why don't you just fix it? This is your first time. It's not the way we do this.
Mm-hmm.
Just go fix it, right? That person is not going to try that again, right? They got caught immediately. There was a subtle but very effective and very firm reprimand culturally that will be enforced again and again. What happens if that person has altered that report some way, right? And they literally, the amygdala, the fear center of their brain goes off the first time there's misconduct. If they don't get caught, if there's nothing that's said to them, they engage in greater and greater and greater misconduct. And by that point, it gets too late, right? That's when you have these big disciplinary systems. That's when you have the big white collar crime cases. That's when you see it's been incubating for 17 years and they've brought all the other managers in. They've just tried to find a way to live in this system with this incredible pressure. And it's probably been cutting a lot of corners and doing a lot of other things, right? That's when it's gone way too far. But that first part of, hey, this is not the way we do things, this is not who we are, that's an enormous signal. And that has to come actually from the direct manager or very close by, right? It can't just come from the CEO. It's got to be something that it comes down the ranks and is really embraced at every level, right? Because think about an employee's experience on the job.
Yep.
If you're Wells Fargo, to pick yet another example of terrible misconduct, right? And you're at one of these branch offices, these branch banks around the country, you know who your boss is. You might know who the CEO is. Would you recognize him if you walked in the front door? Maybe, maybe not. Would you know the members of the board? I don't know.
Right, probably not.
Your
right.
experience in that bank branch,
that's your
direct manager.
world.
That's your world.
Right.
That's the company right there. And so we saw misconduct branch by branch by branch all over the place. And it was amazingly similar misconduct in such different parts of the country. But guess what? If that whole compliance system had been turned around, not to commit misconduct, but to actually enforce, ethical standards, and all of those branch managers had been saying the same thing. No, we really want you to make sure that this is what the customer signs up for. We really want, customers to be happy with it. Not, by the way, what we heard instead, which was go to homeless shelters and sign up people who, for accounts that they don't understand, go, prey on people who don't speak English, go to nursing homes, go to make up accounts. I mean, some of the fraudulent emails that they put in there were basically like, Wells
sign up
Fargo
dogs.
123 at fake.
Exactly.
And the manager saw that. And so you get 5,300 people fired for exactly the same behavior. That is not a coincidence.
No, it's not.
That is a system that creates that behavior. That is pressures that create that behavior. But that whole system and those whole pressures can be completely turned around. But they've got to be turned around at every level of the company. And the good news for compliance officers is if you have a strong ethical culture where people are bought in and they really believe you and they're willing to tell their subordinates, no, that's not who we are. And seriously, that's not the way we do things.
Right. Go
fix it. It takes care of 97% of the misconduct. So you only have to deal with 3%. That's fantastic. What compliance officer would not want to work in that organization?
Well, the thing that we're always talking about is like trying to crowdsource risk management, because what you kind of described is the opposite of what most people's experience is, either because they don't believe that 90% in the middle is like movable. They don't maybe see that that's where the battleground is, or they haven't gotten the resources not just in dollars, but also like time or like words from leadership to get that sort of top down, reinforcement of these things and so forth. And the only way up this mountain though is through kind of like crowdsourcing the risk management, which is going to come from that culture, which is going to be like a positive self-reinforcing thing. Like imagine, going back to your secret garden analogy, like imagine if the flowers could say, I think there's a weed next to me. And then the gardener can say, oh, cool, I'm going to pull that weed, or I'm going to make sure that this thing doesn't grow, because I just love that analogy. Like if you do nothing, the bad things are going to happen. If you do nothing, all the branches.
And by the way, the flower's not reporting next time.
Correct. That's exactly right.
You go backwards. You do nothing. Not only do you have the problems you have, you create new problems that you don't know about, which are even scarier.
And the beautiful opportunity, though, is that it's parabolic each way. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be parabolic down.
All you have to do is turn it. You have to get things working in the right
direction.
You have to be serious about it. Right? Because we are incredibly social animals and we're very sensitive to hypocrisy. We watch what happens, not what is said. Right. So you can create misconduct exactly in the difference between what is said and what happens. Right. People watch this very closely. And if you want some branch manager to be saying that's not who we are and that's not how we do things, then they have to believe that because of what they've seen again and again. Right. This has to be true from the CEO on down. And it's true. It has to be really true. This is who we are and this is what we do.
Yeah, and a company has to put their money where their mouth is, to your point.
I'm not even sure it costs that much in the sense.
I'm saying metaphorically.
I mean, what it means is they have to put their credibility
That's what I'm saying.
Where they're when misconduct is reported, they actually have to do something about it, and they have to do the same thing, whether it's the CEO or somebody in the mailroom. And that can be very politically difficult. But I will say, you only need a couple of those cases.
Correct.
Correct. Because what you have to do
100%.
is turn the tide.
100%.
And a couple of those cases where people really believe you'll start getting reports again.
Exactly.
Right? And then you got to act on those. And then you get reports again. And guess what? Eventually the reports will go down. Initially the reports go up, right? Because there's been so much latent misconduct that hasn't been reported.
Yep.
And they're starting to trust you and starting to believe you. So you're going to be busier for a little while. But eventually this actually goes down because stuff is prevented, and it's prevented early, and it's prevented at small stages, so it's not the 5-alarm fire.
I mean, it's so interesting. People look at their hotline reporting rate, for example, and they gain this weird sense of security. I mean, this is kind of like old school thinking, but they're like, oh, we don't have a lot of reports. That's great. There's inherent to that.
Yeah, you could be North Korea without labor camps.
Exactly.
You've got no reports.
Exactly.
Amazing. Look at that. Do you want to manage that?
I don't.
It's a nightmare.
I'd be
looking off a cliff.
Yeah, I'd be on Indeed. You would get the alert that Nick has updated his resume on Indeed.
Yeah, and everybody else has too, right? Everybody who cares about their own reputation is getting out of there as fast as possible and jumping like rats off the ship. And if you see high turnover rates, by the way, start investigating. That tends to be a red flag for misconduct of all kinds. There's bullying, there's sexual harassment, there's misstatements, people are very uncomfortable with unethical behavior. And they'll put up with it and they'll rationalize it. But you have to realize it's a sorting mechanism. And good people start leaving. The rest of the people may not have other choices, or they're not the people you want employed in your corporation and making decisions and the ones you want to promote, right? Again, you grow what you sow. You grow what's in that garden.
And it reminds me, what you just described kind of reminds me of that like online game you were talking about, where the cheaters end up only being able to cheat with each other. Like if all the people, if all the high integrity people are leaving the organization, who do you think's left? Again, that's a parabolic decline in your culture, 100%. But it's not linear. It's not a linear drop in the culture.
No, it accelerates because these things have tipping points.
Right.
And the issue is credibility. If you're going to turn this kind of thing around, you must be credible. And that means acting in big, high-profile cases and being consistent and being transparent and telling people what you're actually doing and then doing what you told them you're going to do.
Right.
Which seems very basic, but is actually the really hard part. And I need to add retaliation to that. That is incredibly
Glad you
important.
came back to it.
Must stop retaliation, because retaliation is poisonous to this whole system. If people do not trust the company, if they do not trust that they can report, if they do not trust that you will do the right thing, if they think that the person in power is abusing the power and will retaliate against them and go after them personally, you're never going to save your organization.
So
You've got to stop that.
ECI's State of the Workplace study from last year said that 79% of people who actually spoke up experienced actual retaliation. 79. Yeah. So even if that's twice as big as the real number.
Those were in companies that have very poor ethical cultures, though. I have to say that statistic was pulled out. But
so I'm saying, say the average culture, it's probably 20%. If that's
it's
if
much
that's
higher.
The outlier
It's
number.
really, really high. Yeah. It's actually about 50% in the U.S. for sexual misconduct and 51% in Europe. So it's right. I mean, wow.
I'm saying it's not global. It's
averages.
Not 1 in 20 people speaking up experiencing retaliation. It's massive.
It's pervasive
at a time when we need to get it right the most. So how do we start to attack it? I don't.
Well, so there's all these contact points, right? I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is this new vision of ethics as not the thing on high at all, right? It's lived. It's in these, interactions at the branch level, at the very level of where your people are experiencing the company as theirs and as their environment and where they're getting their messages. So a lot of this issue of retaliation also has to be nipped in the bud. It has to be nipped in the bud in various places, right? You've got to make sure that there is a culture right there. A huge basic place to start is don't have these reporting hotlines go right back to frontline managers.
Well, yeah. And how about,
goodness sakes?
And how about the exit interviews? Those should probably be done not by the person who fired them.
You want to actually manage your organization. You want to actually have some control over this stuff. You want anybody to tell you anything? Then that's 101, right? You've got to create confidentiality. You've got to create confidence in your organization. You've got to be able to be responsible and keep this stuff anonymous and, really investigate. And by the way, there's always, a lot, when I say this, people start rolling their eyes and say, oh, well, then you get these, these misconduct reports, which are really, tit for tats and stuff. The actual misconduct, no, and it's really, really tiny, especially with sexual assaults and misconduct and harassment. It's infinitesimal. It's really, I realize it does exist, but if somebody's going all the way through that process and has the details and has it all backed up and all the rest of it, you should just be grateful that they're telling you this information.
100%.
To be able to get this, because the vast majority of it is reported. Between 80 and 90% of that stuff is not reported. So the fact that you are getting someone who gives a damn about your company, just say 100%. Hallelujah right there, about thank you for giving us this information, for helping us, for trusting us, for actually talking to us about something. And now we have to have your back and do something about it.
I mean, it's such a bizarre argument, and it's it almost seems like either somebody is just so ignorant to make that argument, or they're really making a different argument, like they don't want to do the work. Because would you not rather sort through, even if half of them are wrong, wouldn't you rather not sort through those if you have a true commitment to like weeding them out?
The vast majority of them are right. Yeah, I mean, and way overdue, and you're only getting the tip of the iceberg.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly right. So, I mean, but maybe it comes back to that point you were making before of it's about credibility and it's about, doing what you say that you're going to do. You can't say that, oh yeah, we're all about ethics and, integrity is on our mission statement, when we're not willing to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, in terms of time or in terms of like sorting and doing that work. So listen, I think you and I could probably keep going for another 2 or 3 hours.
I would enjoy it, but yes, I know you need to actually go do other things.
Yes.
Thank you for cutting this up. This will be a coherent conversion that other people can follow.
I'm sure. Yes. I'm sure people who are on our wavelength will. Tons.
Yeah,
tons.
and I think, and part of the value of this is just helping people who are interested and care. And giving them the tools to be able to do something about this, right? Because ethics is both simultaneously intuitive and counterintuitive, right? It's intuitive in some sense because we all have those fundamental pieces, those values, the fairness, the equality, the reciprocity, all these basic values that underlie so much. Mm-hmm. So we know when something's right and wrong. It's astonishing how universal that is.
In your gut immediately.
In your gut. The massive disconnect, the huge part about why this is counterintuitive is why don't we do it? Again and again and again. We know exactly what we should be doing, and somehow again and again we're not doing it. And so in order to break down that disconnect, it's really important to give us systems that support us, allow us to do things. And this could be a great message for compliance officers. This is a great message for managers and people who want to
Totally.
run their companies. Like,
CEOs,
people want
absolutely.
to help you. People want to be part of your organization if you're going to run it right. Give them that chance. Empower your people and let them give you the gift of their commitment, their engagement, their best ideas, their innovation, all the things you need and you want from them in order to be able to go forward in the future. But you've got to do these basics first.
They want to give them to you. It's right
They
there for you
want
to
to give
get
this
it.
to you. They
Right.
want to. Yes, it's here. This is the low hanging fruit.
Right.
This is the basic maintenance stuff. The like how to keep the ship together stuff in order to sail where you want to go.
Okay. Let's do a 30-second book plug, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
Can do.
Give us your best 30-second elevator pitch. This is a tall, this is a tall building that we're in right now. So you got a 30-second elevator pitch for the book.
All right. I'd say there's a video, so I can get.
We'll put the video in the thing.
Go to the video, and there's also a website which has got this stuff. But I would say, look, that there aren't too many resources that give you this kind of information in one place, that are so accessible, that are so well vetted and helpful. I mean, everything about this book is geared to be helpful to you. This should be your go-to guide for all this stuff. Jump off from it in all kinds of different directions, but start here first, get the basics in place, and then go do these things in your company, and you will discover how fast you are sailing, how much you can do. And this is the basis for so many other things to work so well and be a competitive advantage.
J.S. Nelson, thank you so much for joining us on the Ethics Experts. Check out the book, pick it up, and until next time. Hello, hello.
Hi.
What's happening?
Hi. There you are. This works.
Here I am.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. What's going on?
Delighted to be here. Yeah, it's been such a busy day. I mean, like you just run from thing to thing, and you
Yeah.
know.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
What's in front of my face now? Yes, there we go.
All right,
Hi.
we'll do this now. Right.
We'll do it. We'll do it. We'll enjoy it. It'll be fun.
Where are you at? Where are you from?
I'm actually talking to you from the Harvard Business School campus.
Sweet.
So, yeah. So this is actually the apartment they gave me on campus, not the
Look at that.
conference center in Milan that I would
really
actually, love to have a cup of coffee in. Yes,
You're really
you would,
upgrading
but
folks lately. I love it.
I know, really. Like, it's not just corporate housing. It looks like this with the view of Milan.
Amazing.
Yes, HBS with enough resources, you could do anything.
Let me change this camera. Hold on one second.
Of course. Yeah, and you went to the Kelly School where, like, there are lots of great people at IU.
What did you say?
I said you went to the Kelly School. They're great people at IU.
Yeah, they are. They
Great
are.
department.
I got kind of lucky because I went to high school in Indianapolis, and it
Yeah.
was a pretty good school there. I wanted to do accounting and finance and econ, so it was a great place to get my start.
Yeah, and not have to go so far from home. Was that actually commutable, or did you live in Bloomington?
So I lived in Bloomington. So I got my CPA, so I ended up having
Yeah.
to get like 150 hours. So everything except for like the last semester was down in Bloomington. And so, yeah. But I did commute down like 2 days. So it wasn't that far. It was like, 90 minutes,
It's not
80
bad.
minutes.
I mean,
not
like,
bad at all.
by East Coast commutes, it's not bad, but
Correct.
or
Well,
even
I didn't-
California commutes, but like for Indiana commutes, maybe,
It seemed bad, but then I moved to Chicago and I was like, I'm spending way more time than this in the car, going, again, a third of the amount of miles. You know what I mean?
Right, but way more slowly, with way much more
Totally.
heartbreak and frustration.
Totally.
And yes, just blood pressure damage and all the rest of it. Yeah.
So I do that to sync up the audio and the video and stuff like that. So I'm pumped to get you on.
Yay!
Yeah, so I appreciate you agreeing to do this. So I'd like this to be, I mean, it's going to be, I can already tell it's going to be a good episode, but I'd like
Aw,
it
thank
to
you.
be kind of valuable for you. So what we like to do is try to, we can cut up clips. And,
that'd be great.
your
Thank you.
book just came out, I know, so we can spend some
Yeah.
time talking about that if you want. I
That'd be
read some of your articles, so we can talk about those kinds of things. Or we can really just go any direction you want. If you want it to just be an organic conversation, that's also fine too. We can just kind of let it go. But I always want to give you a chance to kind of direct where we go, or what we don't talk about, or what we do talk about, or things like that.
Totally. Well, part of what I want to do, especially because your audience tends to be more sophisticated and really in compliance, is to let them know about the book, because they may need to use it, even if they know everything in it, that it really is an educational tool for them to be able to use with other people.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something,